In this series, lowimpact.org talks with people working to build a mutually owned, democratic, decentralised economy that builds community and doesn't destroy nature. We want to increase collaboration to bring about system change. Find links to the sites mentioned in the videos in the description below. Join the conversation by liking, commenting and subscribing to our channel.
So today I'm talking with Shaun Fensom of Save Our Bank. Shaun, I know you because we've been working together on the Mutual Credit Clubs project, and you've been talking with local authorities and I've been talking with accountants and small businesses. And I know you've built some very interesting cooperative projects in Manchester and other places. But I want to talk to you today about the cooperative bank. You're part of a group of co-op bank members. I think you might be even the founder of that group, but of course the co-op bank's not a cooperative anymore. And I believe that part of what your group wants to do is to help bring the bank back into cooperative ownership. But before we hear about that, so tell me, what's the purpose of your work generally? What's the problem you want to help solve with your work?
Well, I trained as an engineer, so I quite enjoy, messing about with technical things. But I've also spent most of my life working in and with cooperatives, so I'm interested in using the cooperative business model to solve problems, and I think it's very relevant to the modern world.
And what is it about the cooperative business model that you like?
Well, it seems to me a very rational way to organise, and I think one of the things that we've seen with the rise of the internet is a new interest in collaboration. You very often, for example, when you look at some of the smaller businesses that are thriving and growing on the internet, they're very used to the idea of collaborating with each other, and they're very often, they're interested in getting things done rather than just simply extracting value. They're interested in what they can do. They're excited by what they can do. So they lend themselves very easily, I think, to cooperative ways of working. And there are lots of examples of that. And a favourite example of mine is the internet exchanges. The internet is actually a network of networks. It's not a single network, and traffic needs to move between networks. And internet exchanges very often are structured as cooperatives or as mutuals. So they exchange traffic between networks on the internet. And without them, the internet wouldn't work. So, the modern world is, the idea that cooperatives are something that belong in the 19th century is they belong in the 21st century.
Tell me what you mean exactly by extract value. I know what I mean by it, but I've come across people who have got sort of different ideas about that. What do you mean by it?
Well, we need an economy that's able to provide the goods that people need to live and to enjoy happy and fulfilling lives, and that should be the aim of things. Really, is to create those things and distribute them to people, in a reasonable way. And I think there has been sometimes a little bit of a focus on just simply the notion of creating profit as the only aim of businesses, whereas I think more traditional businesses are very often interested in what it is that they can actually provide their customers and employment that they can provide to their employees, and they see that as part of their mission. And I think that's a sensible approach. So an overemphasis on, clearly they need to be able to cover their costs, and you can have an argument about what the appropriate reward for investors is, but too much emphasis on fast returns and leads to some of the problems which we've got today. I think most people would agree that there is a lot of inequality in modern society.
and ecological damage. I'm coming from the environmental perspective, and
Indeed.
there's a growth imperative in there to constantly increase returns.
Indeed. So in a sense, I suppose, getting back to the central point, what we want is a set of rules and incentives that protect the planet and that create the goods and services that we need. And it does feel as though the current set of incentives, the way that they work, or the emphasis of some of them doesn't do that. And I think the cooperative model has a huge amount to offer there in a different way of still have a market. You've still got people, it's not a centralized system, but it responds better to people's needs. And there are many examples of that.
Yeah. And there's a democratic principle in the cooperative model as well, isn't there? It's we have a democratic political system, but the economic system is completely undemocratic.
Yes, indeed. And there is another aspect to the cooperative model, which I've worked with quite a lot, which I've kind of alluded to in the internet exchanges, which exchange traffic, which is that cooperatives are neutral vehicles. If you want a group of people, or indeed a group of companies, to collaborate together, to work together, without any one of them dominating or in a fair way, then the cooperative model actually works very well for that. It's a neutral vehicle.
Before we go into the cooperative bank, what other projects have you been involved with? Cooperative projects?
Well, so I'm involved at the moment with an attempt to create an alternative digital infrastructure that's fiber and data centers, so that we can to underpin broadband and other types of electronic communication, which is owned cooperatively by the businesses that make use of it. That's a really very much motivated by that project. That's going, it's growing quite fast, and I'm very pleased with the way that's going.
So, tell me more about this co-op bank group. What's it called, and how many people are in it?
Okay, so I think most people know us as Save Our Bank, however, there is a formal organisation which is called the Customer Union for Ethical Banking, which is itself structured as a cooperative. The Save Our Bank campaign has got about 10,000 supporters, all of whom most of whom anyway, are cooperative bank customers. And around about 1,200 of those are members of the Customer Union. So they pay a small fee every year, £12 a year, in order to support the work of the union. And basically the union and the campaign has always had two aims, and the union shares those aims. One is to make sure that the bank keeps to its ethical principles, which are very strong principles that the cooperative bank has held longer than any other bank on the planet, I would say. For it to stick to those principles, and secondly, to try and find some way to bring it back under cooperative control. So I suppose it's probably worth just going into a little bit of history here.
Yeah.
The cooperative bank, actually, funnily enough, never was actually a cooperative. It used to be owned by the cooperative group. The cooperative group is the biggest of the various cooperatives that run the co-op shops with the co-op logo.
Yeah. Can I just clarify this? So the cooperative bank was never a cooperative.
No, you could never join it. You couldn't be a member and get a vote and have a share in it. All you could do is become a customer. Whereas you can join the cooperative, the co-op, to this day. You can walk into the shop.
Yeah.
They'll want you to invest £1, and then you'll get a blue or a yellow card, or there are various, because there's more than one society, but the biggest one, the cooperative group, runs about 80% of the shops. They'll give you a blue card, and then that entitles you to a discount on your shopping. When there's profits, it can pay you a profit back, the famous old divvy.
Yeah.
And also gives you a vote. You actually have a vote in how the organisation is governed.
So the cooperative
group actually belongs to you. It belongs to its customers.
So the cooperative group used to own the cooperative bank.
Used to own 100% of the bank.
100%, as well as all the stores. It owned the cooperative bank as well.
Indeed.
Right.
And cooperative insurance and various other bits and bobs. So, but there was it all went rather pear-shaped, and in 2013, there was a big hole in the cooperative bank's balance sheet. This followed a merger with Britannia Building Society,
right,
which arguably the Labour government at the time was encouraged, and various things. There were problems with the commercial loan book that the Britannia Building Society had, and that wasn't clear until a bit later, and there were other problems too, and it led to from memory, a £1.5 billion hole in the cooperative bank's balance sheet. And then you may remember two things happened. One was that the cooperative group effectively bailed the bank out using a mechanism where the people who bought bonds in the bank bailed it in other words, and these were people who by this time were largely dominated by American hedge funds. They effectively rescued the bank by putting money into it, and the cooperative group went down to become a minority shareholder.
So it's still a shareholder. The cooperative group is still a shareholder.
It was still a shareholder at that time.
Right.
This is in 2013. And that's when we formed Save Our Bank. And that was just around about the same time. You may remember the scandal over Paul Flowers, who was the chair of the cooperative bank.
I don't remember the details of the scandal now.
Where he was caught. There was a video made of him buying illicit drugs, and he had to resign as the chair of the cooperative bank. So there was a big scandal and there was a big financial hole. So the cooperative bank was kind of reeling after that. And at that point, a lot of people who banked with the cooperative bank said, well, we're going then, because the reason that the bank is ethical is because it's owned by the cooperative group. It isn't anymore. It's now owned mostly by hedge funds. Hedge funds don't have a great reputation for ethical behavior. And so a lot of people felt that was the end of the ethical cooperative bank. The bank protested, no, we will keep to our ethical principles. And Save Our Bank was started because a group of us thought, actually, rather than leaving the bank and going to some other bank, we the customers, a bank is nothing without its customers, and if we stick together, then maybe we can have some influence over what happens next. So we formed the Save Our Bank campaign, and it got some publicity in the Guardian and stuff on the television and the radio and so on, and a lot of people signed up to the campaign. We ended up with 10,000 supporters. And that was interesting because the bank was interested in refreshing its ethical policy. The bank was always, it's not just that it has an ethical policy, it's a customer-led ethical policy. And it announced that it was going to go back to the customers to refresh that policy. We felt that there was a danger that if that was handled in the wrong way by the bank, that could lead to a watering down of the ethical policy. So we called very loudly for the bank not to water down its ethical policy as part of the review. And that was very successful because the then chief executive felt that he wrote an article actually in the Guardian saying we're not going to water down our ethical policy.
And what are the aspects of the ethical policy? What are the ethical?
Well, I think the bit that we were particularly concerned about is that there is a kind of an approach to ethical finance and ethical business behaviour that says, for example, one of the things all of the banks were caught out on was the mis-selling of personal payment protection insurance. And that's arguably unethical behaviour. And therefore, a bank can say, well, we're not going to do that sort of thing in the future. They've all said that. And, that's our ethical behaviour. Whereas the cooperative bank was always very outspoken about things like human rights, disability rights, and indeed, had divested entirely from carbon. There was no investment in fossil fuel extraction by the cooperative bank. And we didn't want to lose those kind of slightly harder edged aspects of ethical policy. It's good to have a strong ethical policy towards your customers, of course, but we wanted to keep that kind of campaigning aspect of the bank, because we felt that this had been a real beacon to other banks in the world since 1992, when Terry Thomas, the then chief executive of the bank, introduced this ethical policy. It had been a real leader. And that's what we felt was worth keeping. We wanted to preserve that. And so the chief executive, as I say, this is back in 2014, wrote an article saying, well, we're reviewing our ethical policy, but we're not going to water it down. So really, there was only in reviewing your ethical policy, there's only one thing you can do if you're not going to water it down, and that's to strengthen it. And that's actually what happened. The bank then announced a new ethical policy, and it was actually stronger than the previous one.
So that's fantastic, yeah.
We thought this is brilliant. So as a result of that, we thought, right, we need to turn this campaign into something permanent. And that's when we came up with the concept of the customer union. We don't know of any other customer unions that any other brand or bank or any other brand for that matter has got anywhere in the world. And so the concept is like a trade union, except it's for the customers.
And it's a co-op.
It's a cooperative that we structured as a cooperative, partly because it makes sense when you're talking about the cooperative bank, but also because one of the things that some of our supporters were saying was, well, the bank needs more capital, because it actually had to go through a recapitalization. And as a result of that recapitalization, the cooperative group ultimately went down to zero. Now doesn't own any of the cooperative bank.
Right.
It's entirely in private hands, apart from the little bit that the customer union owns. So we structured as a cooperative so that we could buy some shares in the bank if that's what our members wanted to do.
So that's what I wanted to ask you. So there are sort of two threads to what you're trying to achieve, and one is ethical banking, which it looks as though you're being really successful, and the other thread is to sort of re-cooperativize in some way. How's that one going?
Well, that's of course hugely ambitious. And a really difficult thing to achieve. A simple approach, you could say, well, effectively you crowdfund it. Lots of people invest, and then we buy the bank back. But the numbers are difficult to make work. No one has crowdfunded on that scale. It took years for the customer ownership of the cooperative movement to build up to the position of where it is now. But that doesn't mean to say it can't play a role, and we still believe it can play a role. But we do believe that the hedge funds, and it's not just hedge funds that own the cooperative bank. There's a lot of individual, around about 30% of it is owned by individuals. People who've invested in bonds, I believe, is the way that works, which have become equity, and also some mainstream investment funds are there as well. But we think that the hedge funds, who by the way completely get, we feel like that they completely get what it is we're trying to do, because I think that they understand the value of the cooperative bank is in its ethical policy and its unique brand. And therefore, they undermine that. If they undermine that, they undermine their own shareholder value.
Yeah.
And so there is a sense in which we have a shared interest. And they're going to want to exit at some stage. That's what hedge funds do. And we think that when they exit, that is the key time at which there may be an opportunity for other cooperative institutions to come in and take a share in the bank.
Any chance for the co-op group to buy it again?
Well, they could, but they won't. I don't.
They won't.
I think they've had enough. They don't want anything to do with the cooperative bank anymore. I suspect. I don't know that, but I imagine that's true. I don't think. They're making a good show of running their shops. They've been doing very well, and so I think they're going to continue to focus on that.
I was talking to a co-op bank customer recently who didn't realise they weren't a co-op. He thought he was part of a cooperative bank, and so how can they still call it the cooperative bank if it's not cooperative?
Well, they as well as sticking to the ethical policy, what they do is they actually support the cooperative movement in a number of ways.
They do.
They offer free banking to cooperatives. And also they've been putting significant amounts of money into a project called the Hive, initially over £1 million, and that's money's being rolled forward, which supports cooperative development. Is very, very valuable contribution to the movement.
Yeah, so it's not like other banks, even though it's sort of been taken over by mainly hedge funds. It's still not like other banks.
Well, I make the point again that the value, I think there's a genuine understanding that the value in the bank is in its ethical appeal, and lose the name, and people would lose trust. That's my view. So for those people, there are many people in the cooperative movement who say it should not be allowed to be called the cooperative bank. I understand that objection, but the point I would make back is to say, any chance of returning it to the cooperative movement would disappear if it were to lose the name.
Yeah. I guess there is a sort of another national cooperative bank in the country, isn't there? Nationwide. I'm a member of the Nationwide, and
it's a mutual. Yes.
It's a mutual. It operates like a bank. I've got a card. I've got a current account. It operates just like a bank. So yeah, I guess there is a cooperative option.
I believe quite a large number of customers of the cooperative bank did go to Nationwide when the problems were big, but the bank's been clawing its way back, and has been adding customers, in fact, in recent times. I think one of the really interesting things, which interests me certainly, is that a key part of their strategy now is to offer services to small and medium-sized enterprises, many of whom are really interested in banking with an ethical bank. They don't have to be co-ops themselves in order to actually care about that. A lot of small businesses, a lot of modern businesses care about ethics and the environment and so on, and good for them. So it's right that there's a bank focusing on that.
So what can people do to help? Are you looking for more members and supporters?
Absolutely. If you're a customer of the cooperative bank, then please do sign up to either just as a supporter or indeed become a member of the customer union. So you go to saveourbank.coop, and then you can join the customer union for £12 a year. And you become a member of a union then, which is actually being formally recognised by the cooperative bank. We actually signed a recognition agreement with the cooperative bank, much like you might have with a trade union. And that means that we meet with the bank regularly. We've agreed that we will warn them if we're going to say something critical. and they will warn us if there's something that they need to do that they think we might be concerned about. So that's a very grown-up relationship that we now have with the bank. So yes, please do go to saveourbank.coop and sign up.
I'll put the links in the description and in the blog article. In a sort of post-COVID world where there's not going to be that much money sloshing around, I don't think. Do you think the Co-op Bank might be interested in mutual credit, offering the members a moneyless payment system?
It's possible. I think that in order to succeed, not just in the post-COVID world, financial institutions and banks need to be evolving their business models. And there's lots of new technology. Technology and the internet make things possible with money that just weren't possible before. And I think mutual credit is an example of that. Mutual credit was always possible, but the use of technology makes it work in a way that's quick and easy. So. And there are many other examples of so-called fintech that banks, are the progressive banks, the ones that are moving forward, are engaging with those kinds of things. So I certainly expect the cooperative bank to be playing a role in those. That could involve mutual credit. I don't know. I can't speak for the bank.
Have you mentioned it to them at all, or not yet?
I've certainly suggested that it's an interesting model that a trusted brand like the cooperative bank, my view is, could play a role in that.
Yeah, definitely. So if you had a genie in a bottle offered you one wish, what would it be?
What, in this context, or?
Actually, this context and the wider context, yes.
Well, in terms of us doing what we set out to do, we'd like to see the bank come back into a majority cooperative ownership, owned by its customers, owned by its employees, and who then have some influence over how it does. I'd make the point that we have a constructive relationship with the bank, which means that we already have some influence, and arguably that's a fundamental part of being a cooperative, is that your members have an influence. So the more of us there are, the more we can influence the bank, and I think the bank values that, because why wouldn't you want to listen to a group of committed customers?
Yeah, it'd be a benefit for the bank, couldn't it?
It's for the other genie wish, the same as everyone else, really. World peace and a solution to the climate crisis, those kinds of things.
What do you think is most likely, getting the Co-op Bank into cooperative ownership or solving the climate crisis?
I'm sure we'll do both.
Oh yeah, okay, great. Well, that's cheered me up a bit. Who would you like to see interviewed, and what questions would you like to see discussed?
Gosh, that's a difficult question.
Is it?
You've done lots of them.
Done lots of different ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything
I don't have an answer ready for that.
Okay, nothing piques your interest. Okay.
No.
All right, so we'll put all the all the relevant links in the description and in the blog article. Are you happy to answer any queries there might be on the
Yes, of
blog?
course. Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks ever so much then, Shaun. And yeah, it's not goodbye for very long, because we're working together on the mutual credit project. So, but thank you ever so much for your time for this interview. And
Thank you.
Really great speaking with you.
Okay.
Cheers, Shaun.